Okay. There we go. Great, I'll start again. We'll just make a quick take to hi, my name is Eleanor. I use the pronoun star or he as my personal pronouns, and I'm the new Work and Civic Programs Manager here at Baltimore Center Stage. A giant welcome to all of our new folks and folks that are joining us back. My job is many things, but one of them is starting to support great civil workers as well as great artists and make their work be accessible here at Baltimore Center Stage. So I'm really excited to not only have this film screening of A Hard Road to Hope by Eleanor, but also to do a big push for fundraising for Crushing Colonialism and their amazing work that they're doing, not only around disability justice, but also decolonization and the support of in the media and representation in the media. Before we get started, I would love to offer a quick land acknowledgement. Based from here at Baltimore Center Stage, if I could have you ground yourself in whatever way feels possible as I am reciting, that's great. Baltimore Center Stage is on the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Scatterland, Lumpkin, and the Susquehanna tribes have also inherited here in this land today. As I repeat this land acknowledgement, I ask that you also look at the legacies of colonization, harm, violence, resilience, and joy that bring us all today in our different walks of life. We give thanks to all the tribal leaders, past, present, future, their elders, and all of their generations and siblings. Thanks for everything we can do. Without having a good relationship with Indigenous folks, we are not able to create a full artscape. So thanks so much for being here with me and acknowledging the traditional lands in which we live. I would like to give a round of applause. Welcome both Eleanor and Jen up, or just Jen? Just Jen daring up, if we can get a round of applause. Oh, wow. Osio, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see you all here. So I am Jen Deering-Lauder. I'm the founding executive director of Crushing Colonialism. I myself am an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and I grew up between my nation's reservation in rural parts of Tulsa County, Oklahoma, and in West Texas, around Abilene. Kind of bounced around the so-called U.S. since, and I've been in D.C. since 2016, and maybe someday I'll be a Baltimore transplant. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the organization. So Crushing Colonialism is an Indigenous-led nonprofit in the so-called United States that uplifts Indigenous people through traditional storytelling, which includes arts, media, and journalism. I founded the organization in 2016, and we are operated by Indigenous people working in a variety of media and arts fields. We work to increase the pay and employment of Indigenous storytellers while also promoting their work and increasing access to professional representation. We produce international reporting and organizing to inform and empower marginalized community members, create professional opportunities, and advocate for the just funding and employment of Indigenous storytellers. In doing this, we control our narratives in order to crush colonialism. Thank you. So, our programming. So we recently launched a quarterly publication called The Magazine. We have some print copies up at the front desk check-in area. So it is the only publication by Indigenous people that is independent media and runs in both Spanish and English, and is online and in print edition. It's all, thank you, all original reporting as well, and we pay our reporters fairly well considering that we're a brand new publication. We give out 400 free print copies to Indigenous community for every edition that we put out, and we do that in order to help cross the digital divide. Many of our people cannot easily access our online content. This is free, the online content is free as well. We have a new edition coming out on June 6th, June 17th. That's Pride themed, so I'm super excited for that. You can subscribe online on our website, crushingcolonialism.org, and you can sign up for a print edition if you would like. You can also sign up for the digital, and then you'll get announcements and emails about all of our work. We also have this huge arts and performance series that we do called Decolonize Beatz. We've done a lot of different events over the years, in person, virtual, and hybrid. But what we're really working on right now is called Decolonize Beatz Indigenous World Pride. So DC is going to host World Pride next year, May 23rd to June 8th, 2025. We know that Capital Pride and Inter-Pride, they don't have the best values. So we're going to make programming by and for Indigenous people. So it's a multi-year programming. This year we're offering a film training to 4 Indigenous queer youth from anywhere in the world. We're paying them. They're going to learn to make a film, and then we're going to screen that film at our in-person events at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. Because somehow I talked the feds into hosting us. Don't know how. So there's the film training this year, and then next year we'll have the film screening and a conversation. We're going to do our best to bring everyone in for that. We also are putting together an album of original music by Indigenous queer musicians from around the world. That will be released in 2025 at our in-person events. We're also bringing those people in, and we'll have a dance and music performance. And what else am I forgetting? Oh, we're also doing an archival project because, surprise, surprise, the Smithsonian does not have any Indigenous queer of any kind, Two-Spirit or otherwise, materials in our archives. So we are doing an international, like around the world, archival project to bring in posters, buttons, stickers, interviews. My apologies, Billy, I went too fast. Any kind of materials other than ceremonial, we'll be bringing into the archives. Yes. Yes. Yeah, so we actually have a planning council that we put together that has Indigenous folks from around the world. We have someone representing so-called Canada, US, New Zealand, Central, South America, Latin America, and I'd say so-called for all of these, and Africa. And we're still trying to get a couple more, someone from Australia, Asia, and the Arctic. But we're really doing our best to make this a really like international, queer, Indigenous like event and programming. And the best of my knowledge, nothing like that has been done before. So we have a lot of really exciting things going on. We recently relaunched our website, crushingcolonialism.org. We have a shop on there now that has merchandise for sale to help fund our activities. We pay all of our artists. There are, along with our logo, there are 3 designs on there. All of these designs are actually by queer Indigenous artists. Our new one that just came out is in honor of Nex Benedict. He was a Choctaw, non-binary, Two-Spirit, trans teenager who lost their life due to anti-queerness. I actually went to the same school as them. So we commissioned some art to honor them by Solange Aguilar, who is queer Indigenous artist who did the designs. We do have some stickers out there, but you can find more things online. And finally, I guess I'll get into the donate part of this now that I've told you about everything we're doing. So, we can't do this work without community support. We are the only Indigenous nonprofit in the so-called US producing original content and supporting our Indigenous storytellers, journalists, and artists that is committed to the principles of disability and language justice. Many of the traditional forms of nonprofit funding, like grants or foundations, aren't available to us due to racism, ableism, and anti-queerness, and just the nature of the nonprofit industrial complex. We're also pro-Palestine, so if you can imagine. Yes, we are absolutely pro-Palestine. We stand with all of the people suffering from genocide around the world. Sudan, DRC, funders, of course, are not very fond of that. So, we really rely on community, and we do everything within our power to not take corporate sponsorships. We're not next year going to be like Decolonize Beatz Indigenous World Pride brought to you by Lockheed Martin. No, we're not doing that. So, money. I'm sorry, y'all, we need money. So if you have to give, please give. Spread the word to your friends, your family, your networks. And we're also always available to do events. While we're here to serve Indigenous people, we understand that there is not just one kind of Indigenous person, as well as the fact that if we're not all free, then none of us can be free. So we are always here to work in solidarity with other communities and movements. So with that, I will stop talking at you, and I will pass over the mic to my wonderful, rad, kick-ass friend, Eleanor Goldfield. All right, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to the Baltimore Center Stage for hosting us. And I'm not going to talk for very long because I'm going to film so that I don't have to talk again. And I just want to say that this is very much a story about a singular place, West Virginia, what is known as. It is filmed at a specific time in 2019, but it is also about all such places and all such times. It's about the coal fields in Germany that lay open like sores ringed by wind turbines that only turn on when they run out of coal. It's about Baltimore, about Curtis Bay, where skyscraper piles of coal waft poison onto the kids and communities below. It's about Oak Flat, which you can find information out at the table, where, as the Apache say, Creator touched the earth, that is at risk of being destroyed for copper mining. It is, of course, about Gaza and every inch between the river and the sea. It is about every place and every time that has struggled against colonialism and capitalism. So really, as we watch, please feel free to echo outward, to hear those stories in a myriad of languages and times. And we'll be able to discuss more about this and your thoughts after the screening. So please stick around for that. Thank you so much again for being here, and enjoy part of the film.
Going through this land, I feel a mixture of peace and tranquility and belonging that I don't feel in other places, but I also feel a sense of pain and loss and rage, thinking about all the horrors that my people went through, as well as other Indigenous people, and seeing what's been done to the land in the name of so-called progress.
If you put all of the land that had been destroyed by mountaintop removal in a straight line, it would start in Washington, D.C. at the White House. It would go all the way to San Francisco, California. It would be more than 0.8 of a mile wide. Every male in the history of my family here, since we've been here in this land, has been a coal miner until my generation.
My favorite quote goes, "You can burn their houses to the ground and they'll rebuild. But if you destroy their accomplishments, their history of who they are, then you destroy them. It's like they never existed."
Communities have just been left to decay, and they're just empty shells. They've been the foundations of communities have been completely destroyed.
It seemed to me the structure is set up to allow the stuff that you wouldn't allow if it was up to you. You feel like there's nothing you can do because you have these huge gas companies with all their resources, and then the state seems to be on their side as well.
You have to stand together to really make the difference. And I think that the miners showed us how to do that. I think that we have to continue to show the generations to come how to do that.
Everything that you do in your life every day is political, whether you like it or whether you don't. And if you don't choose to be involved in it, then there's some son of a bitch that's dead set against anything that you believe in does get involved in it. So it's either you or them. And that's the only way, to me, that you can look at politics.
Well, thanks again for hanging out with us, y'all. And just as a reminder, before you leave, if you haven't had a chance to donate to Crushing Colonialism, then please do so. There's also like some really bad information out there about the rad stuff that Crushing Colonialism is doing, and other connected issues like Overflash, which is the horrific copper mining project that's at stake in Apache homelands. So, we wanted to start talking about how this film came to be, which I feel is really your story to tell here. So yeah, everyone can hear me. Yeah. So back in 2019, the before COVID times, I had been doing quite a bit of reporting on different pipelines and resource extraction projects in Central Appalachia, so like Eastern Ohio, West Virginia, Southwestern Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And it was all kind of an article here, an article there, but as the research grew, I realized this is so much more than one pipeline, one project. This is a web of extraction that is being built. And so then it just kind of started to turn into a book that I'll get out eventually. But I had an article series I was thinking of working on at the time, and I really wanted to go into the parts of the historic coal fields. I really wanted to go see West Virginia and see the legacy of coal mining and timber and how that has led us to this place of fracking in West Virginia. And, I normally do my travels alone. I'm kind of, outside of my disabilities now, like I'm a pretty independent person, grew up in the country, raised an only child. So I usually travel alone, but this time I was like, I want company. So I asked Eleanor and another friend to come along. And we did 10 days? I think it was 10 days in my very fully packed SUV, 3 of us people, snarkily and happily traipsing through the West Virginia mountains. And, I walked away with a pile of research for my book. And then the next thing I know, one day, Eleanor's like, oh yeah, I made a film. And so Harper the book happened. Yeah, it did. And on that note, I think it's apt to talk about like the connecting of issues because, of course, crushing colonialism is, as the name suggests, about crushing colonialism and Indigenous issues and how that then relates to things like labor and climate and disability. And one of the things that I feel like it's kind of like my Jewish brother nagging thing that I do is like, if we just sit in our silos and like we focus on our one single issue, we're all going to die staring at like funhouse mirrors of ourselves and our issues. So the only way that we can do this is to what the Palestinian professor and author Mohamed Bouhier calls an organic anarchism, which is just like it's not this kind of self-conscious anarchism. It's not like an ideology. It's just naturally working together. It's mutualism. It's solidarity, and you can call it whatever you want. That's just the term that he uses. But the idea is that you have to connect all the lived experiences because no one is just one person. Yeah.
I just want to say I don't know how much I would with that. I just feel like we have a basic our culture of that. Well, I say this what wants us to be separated out. Basically base separation to system to our culture and I feel like and more organized and conscious advocacy movement. Where I was like in a semi-conscious one will be throughout.
Well, so I guess I should be more clear what that means. Like self-conscious anarchism is the idea that like it's the sort of ideology, and you're sticking to that ideology. Whereas what the Mohammed Bamieh calls an organic anarchism is the idea that like you just do the thing, and you do the thing either because it's a part of a cultural practice. Where in terms of the Palestinians, part of their cultural practice is solidarity and mutual aid. Long before 1948, but of course after in refugee camps and things like that. So they wouldn't call themselves anarchists, as he points out. A lot of them don't even know that ideology. But it is the action of that. And so I think that also speaks to the film where, as somebody who grew up in poor white areas in the South, I'm not going to go into a place like West Virginia and be like, let me talk to you about anarchy, because that's just going to end like really poorly. So I'm going to sit down on somebody's porch and talk shit about the government, and then basically see where those analyses can link up. And basically through that, you have what is organic anarchism, but you never use the word, right?
So you're saying to moving that box.
I'm saying know who you're talking to. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, as a tribal citizen, if somebody comes to me and tells me to be an anarchist, I'm allowed them out the door and say I'm going to tribal sovereignty. Take if you're being anarchist and you go talk to someone else. Now, am I not a radical leftist? Yes, I am. Do I have problems with my own tribal government? Hell yes. But I think, kind of like Eleanor said, it's the knowing your audience. But there are definitely ways that movements and communities can all be working together, because these issues do all touch together. You know, like in Native community, when we talk a lot about like pipelines and extractive industries and things, we also talk about the higher rates of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits. You know, these giant man camps get built, they bring in, you know, predominantly non-Indigenous, mostly white, out of the area of workers, and they come in and the rates of sex trafficking and murder and violence increases. You know, you can absolutely make a connection of disability justice to climate justice, you know? So I'm not speaking for Eleanor, but for me, like I think of it as there is a connection in all of these ways, and so many more than what we could ever imagine, you know? And I think, speaking of like terminology, I think one of the things that I wanted to ask is, so land back, what does that look like in a place like West Virginia, your ancestral homelands? It's kind of a tough one, because most of us who, and not just my people, but other Indigenous peoples of what's called West Virginia, most like were murdered. And then the few that were made, we were all moved west. So into this colonial system where the federal government has to decide whose tribe is legitimate, whose land is legitimate, like land back on that way. I honestly don't even know how it would work. But also, the conversation Eleanor and I were having was, sure, give us our land back, but also like it needs to be cleaned up. Don't come in and make a mess and then leave it for us to clean up. Like, there's plenty of work out there to do, like the land reclamation and cleaning up of all of the pollution and, you know, the centuries of damage that's happened. Yeah. It's a tough one, and it was interesting too when we were on the trip. The three of us that went on this trip, we kind of stood out quite a bit compared to a lot of people, and we heard a lot of, you all aren't from around here, are you? And in my mind, I was like, well, actually, part of my family is. They've been here a lot longer than you. So that was also kind of an interesting thing. It's like, who gets to be from where? And what does that look like? And who gets to define that? And I think that's also kind of goes into like self-demanding resources. And you just deny the entire entity of people. It makes it a lot easier to just be like, well, you know, they're all dead, they're all gone, they moved west, we don't need to worry about it. But yeah. Yeah, which I think is also why like in the film where they talk about teaching history and how that is grassroots activism, the idea of understanding history allows you to understand your present and therefore construct a future that is not as fucking horrific as the present. And so I think that's also a really important aspect of it. And of course, why the education system is trying so hard to ensure that Indigenous histories are silenced, why Black and Brown histories are silenced, because they go against this narrative of American exceptionalism, of white supremacist patriarchal culture that is so important to maintain order in the so-called United States. So I think, again, like understanding history, not just your people's history of like, how long have I been here, but like the history of the place that you're in and the history of this imperial project, colonial project of the United States. And that's also why West Virginia is like a microcosm, right? Like they said in the film, it's a resource colony. But then is the entire United States a resource colony? Like that's the whole point. It was created for capitalist reasons with the battering ram that is colonialism. So I think that the history is so important there. And I think you probably have, or Russian vocalists might have like a lot of the grad resources for reading or watching or understanding the indigenous histories of the so-called United States from an indigenous perspective. There are things out there. I have not found much on like West Virginia and Native people. Most of what out there, it's like historical documents by, you know, white settlers, colonizers. But there are quite a few books out there. Like we are getting published more. We have more movies being made. We have podcasts coming out. Like there's been a little bit more recognition of Indigenous people and like the media that we make and the work that we do. It's a different topic, but related to Cherokee people. The podcast This Land by Rebecca Nagel is really great. There were 2 seasons, both about 2 very important Supreme Court cases, and Rebecca kind of weaved in her own personal family story. It was really great. Then the first season especially like talks about how our reservation in Oklahoma was established, de-established, and then re-established. You know, so it's a great podcast. Like I would highly recommend it. And I think part of that history too is understanding like that this goes far beyond getting, and I feel like people in this audience probably already know this, so I might be preaching to the choir a bit, but like getting the right people in office is bullshit. And the idea that we can vote our way to collective liberation and vote our way to whether that's land back or what have you. There's no way to ballot box that, which again goes back to the activism thing and how to use a myriad of tactics that are directed at the root causes of our shared oppression. So, yeah. That brought to mind the Mountain Valley Pipeline. I'm not sure like how familiar we're all maybe with it, but it's 330 miles around there. 330 miles of very highly volatile, colorless, odorless fracked gas coming from West Virginia into Southwest Virginia. The community in that region has been fighting it for 10 years. They have done an amazing job. But the politicians, including the Democrats, have just done everything in their power to get MVP to go through. At this point, And I also want to say, I can't remember the diameter of the pipes. These things are huge. Like if I was 45 inches, yeah. Like if I were able to get down on the ground and like move my body that way, I could fit into these pipes. They are enormous. And they go through the Appalachian Mountains, which are primarily made up of karst or limestone. So they're very porous. There's a lot of cave systems. You know, the potential for just unbelievable destruction is so high. And the Democrats, Senator Manchin, he's just done everything to push this project through, despite what the community wants. The only reason I believe that pipeline has not been completed is because there are so many just brave, badass Appalachians for years who have been putting their bodies and lives and freedom on the line, doing lockdown after lockdown after lockdown. It has been an impressive campaign, if you want to say that word about something that's so obvious. But the company, it's EQT, right? It's MVP, it's EQT. I thought that was Mariner. No, that's ETP. That would be ETP. Well, I can't remember the company that's over MVP. I think it's EQT. But they actually just put out an announcement saying that, oh, hey, the pipeline's done, we're ready to put it in service. Which these pipes have been, before they were rolled from the ground, have been sitting out in the elements for years. All the protective coatings that they're required by law to put on them, it's completely degraded, the pipes are rusting, and they're saying, all right, everything's in the ground, let's start pushing this trapped gas through, And it has so many devastating impacts, obviously the environment, people's health, people's economic livelihood. One of the people that I've interviewed and stayed in touch with over the years, Janie Hale, he used to lease out part of his land to let his neighbors come in and let their livestock drink from his ponds. Well, barely any construction had even happened around Jamie's home, and then all of his ponds dried up. He used to have some really nice berry bushes, and he, every year with his daughter, they would take all these berries and make jams and go sell them when the berries stopped producing. I know someone else who had an organic family farm, and a pipeline got put in next door, and because of that, they're no longer allowed to say they're organic. And I don't give a damn about capitalism, but there's so many things that come with this, Yeah. Do we want to take, if anybody has questions or? Yeah, we can definitely keep just going on and on at all, but if you're all also welcome to jump in. This is a small enough room, so.
Yeah, given that this was, how long ago was this film? About
2019.
Yeah, so in that 5 years, what has happened in a lot of those communities in terms of where those sites are now, the continued effects of the environmental destruction or remediation efforts. Do you know much about what's going on there today since the documentary was filmed?
So I stay in touch with the several of the folks in the film, and of course when COVID hit, coal and fracking were considered to be too necessary to, take some time off. So those continued totally unabated. A lot of the safety regulations weren't followed because people weren't checking on them. So more people got hurt, more spills and more leaks and shit like that. As Jen said, MVP continued to try and push through Appalachia, even though it got horrifically delayed by people standing in the way. But yeah, so coal and fracking continued to rise. People still try to talk about coal as if it runs the country, when the last I checked, it's about 15% of our domestic energy comes from coal. The majority comes from quote-unquote natural gas. So these communities are hurting more than ever. Of course, during COVID, they got fuck all too. they didn't get any of the big corporate handouts or anything. So these communities are doing worse than when we were originally there, if that's even believable, but that kind of goes for the whole country, right? So, yeah, it's not good. It's bleak. They're continuing to try, as Terry, the guy in the film, said, it's like trying to scrape the last of the peanut butter from the jar with the coal. Like, they're just trying desperately to get what's left, so they continue to blast mountaintops off, even when they're not sure if there's anything in there. So they're destroying mountains without even cause at times. So it's not good. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you so much for this incredible talk, incredible discussion, and thinking about a lot of what y'all said, because I just came from Curtis back into the now I think of Jim because like one of CSX's arguments, the residents there, we were here first. So this was tough shit. And like as coal use goes down, they're fucking because like that's one of the main like export terminals. And now that the channels are back up, the coal's like moving through the community again. And they're at their wits end. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, more about that national anarchism thing. It's like, how do we get folks who have so much, reasons to feel angry and not solidarity with anyone else because they're fighting for their lives? Like, how do we get communities like South Baltimore working, in touch, more closely working with other sacrifice communities around the country, including in Western?
Well, I feel like you have a good answer for that, Max, probably. But I think it's kind of like the silver bullet question, but I also think that, kind of like what I was saying earlier, is like know your topic too. Like, so when I was down in Louisiana fighting it's basically like the extension of DAPL, the Bayou Bridge Pipeline, I would sit down, like I sat down on a porch with a guy who was, and I literally was just like, so you mean the Democrats? So do I. Like, tell me why. And we sat and talked for like 2 hours while a friend of mine was something wrong with his car or whatever. But by the end of it, it's like he had heard the word anarchy the first time in his life. Well, not the first time, but he was like, oh, it doesn't sound as scary as I thought it would. But also, like, it was a seed. And I think, like, and you know this because you do so much of this, I think it's a lot of, like, talk to your people. Like, so I feel comfortable walking into predominantly like white labor, right-leaning spaces and talking to folks and like having a beer even though I fucking eat beer. And like being, not like playing a role, but just being that part of myself. I feel really comfortable doing that, and I think that's kind of what I also wanted to do with this film. Is like, we shouldn't treat communities as foregone conclusions to be right-wingers or to be sacrifice zones, so who gives a shit? But because CSX was there first, what a fucking horrific thing to say. But like, just going into these communities and like sharing that aspect of it and listening to them and then sharing where you're coming from, I think is really huge. Like, or talking to dock workers about Gaza, it's like that, when the conversations were happening about trying to stop boats that were carrying weapons, it's like, well, you can't just walk in with like a Free Palestine shirt, right? You have to like walk in and be like, hey, like, what union is it? Like, talk to people about their issues and like their demands for better working like labor rights and shit, and then weave that in, because again, everything is connected. So I think like, and it sounds like it takes forever, and like I guess it does, but I think if you look at in history, there are these tipping points, and I think that we continue to get closer to larger and more frequent tipping points, and it looks ugly, and the death of empire is always going to be a very loud and final occurrence, and I wish that weren't the case, but it is. And so I think the best thing that we can do is go into those spaces, like I said, but also then build the worlds that we want to see now. So like mutual aid and building these spaces, not just to take care of each other, but to give each other those dreams and imaginations of what that world can look like that we all deserve and want. Knowing your audience. Like, I have grown up rural, I feel comfortable going into rural communities and talking to other folks. Like, I've talked with people like also in Louisiana. I've spent quite a bit of time down there. And like, I remember having a talk with this Cajun man, because he was like, the pipelines and this and then that, they keep food on the table. I was like, well, that's true. But do you like fishing? Like fish? I love fish. I love that fish. I will eat a bottom feeder any day. And it was like, yeah, but we don't get the same kind of hauls that we used to. And I was like, yeah, you don't. There's a reason for that. And I just kind of laid some of that out, and then it's like, oh, okay. I was at an action against the Bayou Verge pipeline on one of my trips down there, and there's a group of predominantly white, very enthusiastic youth. They had a lot to say to the pipeline workers. And I'm not saying I disagreed, but I was also like, dude, I'm disabled. We're in the middle of a swamp. I'm native. We got other natives here. Maybe you white folks could chill out before you make something really bad happen. And I just, at one point, like normally when I'm out in those situations, I'm out as press. I wear plain clothes. I don't yell or scream. I try to look objective. But I just got so angry and got so sick of listening to these kids. And then the pipeline runners were getting really riled up. And I finally said, I just kind of came flying out of my mouth. I said, the pipeline workers, I was like, hey, you all need jobs. Do you make enough to risk getting cancer? Do you make enough here to risk being disabled for life? Because I know you're getting paid well, but is it really that good? Also, green jobs, if I have any thoughts about green jobs, I was like, you can have jobs for life, just cleaning up the land. This is one pipeline. You've got, 6 months of work? We all know you're not from here. You're away from your family and your friends and your homes. And when I said those things, they just all got really quiet, and like there was kind of a shift. Now, did they all turn around and quit their jobs? Probably not. But I think sometimes it's just like finding that space. And within Native community, I'm not super wildly popular because I push on Natives. I'm like, yo, where's your disability access? We have the highest rates of disabilities per capita of any ethnic and racial group. How can we talk about tribal sovereignty and climate justice and completely disconnect the disability piece? So I think it's I don't even remember the question anymore, Max. I went off on a ramble, but yeah, I'm just gonna stop there. Actually answered it. Oh, perfect. My rambling was useful.